opportunity to present my research in this esteemed conference. So today I'm going to talk about Lean Six Sigma in banking, drivers, inputs, influencers, and outcomes. So if we have a quick look at the literature of Lean Six Sigma, which has been one of the most powerful continuous improvement practice, synergizing both Lean and Six Sigma together. It has been applied across several sectors in services, specific to services. So if you see this slide, it talks about the healthcare, education, banking and financial services and insurance, information technology, airlines, telecom, food and beverage services, non-profit organization, government, other services, and services in manufacturing sectors. So what you see on the right side is a sample literature which talks that the application of Lean Six Sigma has been successful in almost all the service sectors which we have. So this shows that Lean Six Sigma has penetrated into every corner of the service sector. But having said that, if we look at the literature on banking and financial services in more specific, the literature is restricted to about 5 papers. That means we have very limited literature available to us on application of Lean Six Sigma in banking, financial services, and insurance. So looking at these 5 papers, if you see the Wang and Chen paper, it observes the methods to integrate Lean Six Sigma with the TRIZ models, the Russian methodology of inventive problem solving in the context of banking. Another study by Delgado talks about performing a longitudinal study on operational benefits derived from LSS implementation. So they studied over the period of time how Lean Six Sigma implementation changes and what it could have implications on an organization in a banking setup. Koenig and Das demonstrated the importance of incremental innovations, which was very famously available in Besant's literature, the incremental innovations, through Lean Six Sigma in Dutch multinational organizations. The other research talks about the case study approach to define the project opportunities in banking, and the Petros and Malev paper talks about mapping concept, the consumption mapping concepts to develop standardization of Lean Six Sigma. So looking at these 5 papers, what I want to highlight in this slide is, number 1, there is limited research on Lean Six Sigma in banking. Number 2, the research which happened in these 5 talks about the operational benefits of Lean Six Sigma. When I say operational benefits, it means what does it mean to the bottom line of the organization? It reduces the cycle time, it reduces the number of errors in an organization, it reduces the defects which goes to the customers, and etc. But none of these studies actually looked at Lean Six Sigma from a strategic perspective. So what does it mean to a bank's strategy of applying Lean Six Sigma? Can Lean Six Sigma lead to competitiveness for a particular banking or financial organization? So these are the few available gaps which we found in the literature, in this limited literature. Going ahead, these are the 5 research questions which we put forward for our research. So what are the driving factors for banks that motivate them to embark the Lean Six Sigma journey? So, of course, the famous Lean and Six Sigma methods in manufacturing, which originated in the operations floors of Toyota and Motorola, had a particular motivation. After the Second World War, there was a compelling need for Japan to go ahead and start improving their quality initiatives, which was a huge driver for them to embark a quality journey. But when it comes to banking organizations especially, what are the driving factors? That's the first question we have put forward. The second question is, once we have a motivation, there should be some input factors which lead to change management initiatives. So what are the input factors? And once we have a full-fledged Lean Six Sigma implementation running in an organization, it gets influenced by some factors. For example, a leadership change happens in an organization. When Jack Welch moved out of GE, what happened to the Six Sigma implementation in GE? Is it the same? So when leadership changes, something changes in the Lean Six Sigma. Like external organizations, in a perfect competitive market, when a new player enters into the market, there could be disruption in the market. And that could lead to some complications in the way we customize our change management programs, right? So there are some influencing factors which we need to explore in the setup of banking in the context of Lean Six Sigma. What are the practical outcomes? Operational, strategic, tangible, intangible, direct and indirect. And what are the theoretical outcomes that could emerge from Lean Six Sigma in banking? So these are some research questions which allowed us to go ahead on this particular piece. And this is the methodology which we followed. So as I was mentioning, the scope is in services specific to banking. The primary focus is to look at the competitive advantage of quality rather than the operational benefits which a quality initiative could deliver. We used a case approach. We selected cases using a method called purposive sampling by pattern. Then we approached a few of the organizations and then we scoped them, which are very good in Lean Six Sigma deployment. I would explain more about it in my later slides. What is the selection criteria using purposive sampling? In talking about analysis of the case data, we got data from multiple data sources, which included interviews, our direct observations on the fields in 3 banks across 3 years. So it is a longitudinal stay over 3 years in 3 banks. And then we analyzed the data using both within case and cross case analysis in order to come up with our findings. Our findings include answering the question of identifying the driving, input, and influencing factors in Lean Six Sigma and banking, and theoretical outcomes from this research. So these are the case profiles which we have selected. We have a global conglomerate banks. That means they are multinational banks headquartered in the US as well as in the UK. So 2 banks from US and 1 bank from the UK is selected for the sample. So this is the purposive sample which we have used. There is a huge diversity in the employees which they have, the number of branches, their revenues, their customers. So there is a huge diversity in the selection process which encouraged us to get closer to the generalizable results at the end of the research. The main thing which I highlighted in the top is these 3 banks also are different from each other, or unique for the matter, in the way they approach the quality management. For example, Bank A claimed that they had a positive experience of lean deployment before they embarked the Lean Six Sigma journey. That means they're trying to graduate from lean to Lean Six Sigma and seeing the success of lean in the past 2 years. Whereas the Bank B commenced their Lean Six Sigma deployment without any Lean or Six Sigma experience in the past. That means they're doing a maiden Lean Six Sigma deployment in the organization. Bank C declared that they have practiced Lean and Six Sigma as 2 different initiatives in their organizations, right? So these are unique even from the angle of quality management perspective, because each of them have their own style of looking and deployment of quality, the path which they followed before they embarked the Lean Six Sigma. Right. Now this is our within case analysis. We try to understand what are the key operational drivers. Most of our data came from the interviews. We had an opportunity to conduct about 110 interviews across 3 years of time. And the other data which we try to validate is through the archives of the organizational files and observations over the field. And also we involved ourselves in the projects the organizations demonstrated using Lean Six Sigma. So the key operational drivers, which are nothing new here, we are trying to reconfirm what is already there in the literature in this side, because there is enough literature to talk about the operational drivers of Lean Six Sigma. Something like generating higher efficiencies, reducing process variation, or improving the responsiveness towards the customer satisfaction, etc. What I want to focus more on the strategic drivers which drive a Lean Six Sigma initiatives. It's more about creating a culture of process improvement. It's not just about doing a couple of projects and revealing some sales, saying I reduce the cycle time or reduce the number of defects in our organization. But many of the leaders whom we interacted in these banks have mentioned about their appetite to build a culture of process improvement as a mindset, as a DNA of the organization, rather than a single-term initiative. The other ones include improved competitiveness with regard to quality. Is one of the driving factors. So it's not about delivering quality at one time, but delivering quality again and again to the customers. In order to emerge as organizational leaders to acquire more market share, how can we use competitive advantage in quality? Third bank actually was more employee-centric organization probably. They were more concerned about how can Lean Six Sigma help my employees to be more motivated, how can they get a feel of employee empowerment using a strategic resource like Lean Six Sigma. So these were a few of the strategic drivers which came out in our interviews. The input factors were again divided into organizational resources, organizational processes, and operational capabilities. There were several of them here. I'm not going to read all of that for you, but to highlight a few of them. Organizational resources, including the personnel who actually do these projects. So it could be your belting system, which is very famous in the Six Sigma nomenclature. But few organizations decided to go away with the belting system. For example, if we see one of these banks actually started with the traditional belting system, and they found a lot of resistance from their staff because they had a sense of discrimination amongst the staff, saying, okay, so I'm a green belt and a black belt is much superior to me with regard to the knowledge and capabilities. So the sense of discrimination was one of the resistance factors which came bottom up, which did not allow the organization to progress on Lean Six Sigma. So later they rebranded their entire program as a Lean Six Sigma practitioner program rather than the belting system, and said everybody is equal and everybody has an opportunity to participate in this program, and so on. So these are a few of the input factors which actually lead to the success in the banking setup which you've identified. The other input factors also include the operational capabilities, especially the transactional capability, the process management capability, the logistics and codification coordination. So any process which is not managed properly cannot be improved so effectively. That's what the erstwhile the management quality gurus spoke about. So if the process management becomes an operational capability on which Lean Six Sigma could be a dynamic capability of process improvement. So if you're not able to manage a process over a period of time, then the opportunity for improving the process becomes very less, because process management becomes an operational capability, or rather an input factor for a successful Lean Six Sigma deployment. Right. So these are a few of the input factors. I did not talk about all of them because there are a lot of input factors which you'll identify here. A few influencing factors. So endogenous and exogenous, there's a classification we have done. So the factors inside the organization which either retard the success of Lean Six Sigma or which will progress the success of Lean Six Sigma. And the exogenous factors outside the organization which would make it successful or a failure story. So to highlight a few of them, it is the effective use of technology, organization structure, leadership, employee motivation, recognition, visibility, etc. are some of the factors internal to the banks which actually are influencing the success of Lean Six Sigma. Talking about the external factors, the talent market. One of the bank actually mentioned that once we train our people in Lean Six Sigma methodology, they get trained, they get certified, there's a sense of happiness in them, but within a few months we lose the talent to the market. They jump on and go to another job using this as a value addition in their CVs. So that was another concern. So these are some of the exogenous factors, like losing talent to the market, because in the name of empowerment, we empower staff with this training and learning on Lean Six Sigma. Of course, they do a project for us, but later we lose those staff. Right? It also talks about the customer feedback. It also talks about the marketability of the trained staff and some of the social and regulatory factors. So these are some of the performance metrics which we have observed over the 3-year period in the 3 banks. So we have classified them into 7 different sections. So the good part which we observed with Lean Six Sigma, which overcomes the drawbacks of Lean and Six Sigma independently, is that there's literature which says that Lean is a bottom-up approach which empowers the bottom line people to come up with ideas, and later these ideas materialize into projects and deliver savings. However, Six Sigma literature says that Six Sigma is a top-down approach where there are Six Sigma champions and then sponsors who come up with projects, and then it gets executed, and then we train, and then it gets executed. So there are challenges in both bottom-up, there are challenges in both top-down approaches, which the critiques of both Lean and Six Sigma highlighted in the literature. The good part of Lean Six Sigma is the first component which comes out here. The project ideas came both from the frontline managers, frontline staff, as well as from the managers. So it is basically a top-down and bottom-up, both clubbing together to overcome the drawbacks of Lean and Six Sigma in the past. Talking about the other factors which we classified here are the projects which are executed at the green belt level. The numbers talk for themselves. Some of the project categories are efficiency related projects, so effectiveness related projects. Efficiency could be like cycle time, which could reduce, which could improve the efficiency of the process. Effectiveness could be something like the turnaround time, how quickly I'm able to deliver to the customer, the responsiveness, stuff like that. The tangible sales, the bottom line impact, which is very clear on the $1 million sales here, which is produced year on year with the organizations. Stakeholder satisfaction on client and employee satisfaction has been captured. And the return on investment on the cost, the tangible outcomes, and the percentage of return on investment. So what this confirms to us is that if we see the return on investment of almost all the 3 banks which you have seen, it is tremendously high when it comes to Lean Six Sigma deployment. So this talks about the sustainability element of such an initiative, because we have studied it not for 1 year or 2 years, but it's a 3-year period. And this 3-year period actually extended further, because after this research, where we kind of scoped it for 3 years, but we had opportunities to go back and look the organization even in the 4th year. Not in this rigor, but with the interactions with the staff, and this initiative has been still going and running. So going back to our literature on sustaining quality for a longer time, so this could be a strategic resource for sustaining quality, because when it compared to the Lean and Six Sigma, which were practiced independently in Band 3, if you see the return on investment is tremendously high compared to the Band A and Band B. So they are clearly able to see more value in Lean Six Sigma compared to Lean and Six Sigma separately, right? When we see the organization 2, which has made a maiden effort on Lean Six Sigma without any experience on the quality management practice before, they were able to break even only at in the year 2. That's fine. But they were able to progress further in the year 3 with 175% operating solid in this way. Right. So this talks about the tangible benefits which Lean Six Sigma could actually deliver. Okay, so this slide is not for you to read because you cannot. There's a lot of stuff here. This slide is actually put up here to highlight the meaning of the cross-case analysis and what came out of the cross-case analysis. So the interviews which were conducted was kind of summarized in these 3 boxes, and then the second order themes were emerged. So what is common among the many people who spoke to us? So in the 110 interviews, we had people representing the frontline staff, the managers, as well as the CXO level, the senior managers, the directors, and the CXOs. Now, talking about the emergent themes, is it common, the perceptions of Six Sigma, how it changes across the different layers of the organization? If it is resisted, from where is the resistance coming? Is it the political resistance from the senior management because they have peer pressures? Is it from the bottom log? Or is it in the middle layer of the organization which actually has an obligation to deliver and they show a hidden resistance there? So that came out in our second order themes which were summarized here. But resistance is just one factor. Like that, there were several other factors which were analyzed, and that helped us to emerge into some theoretical themes out of these interviews. Right. Now, these theoretical themes are summarized here. So this actually talks about the theory which underpins the Lean Six Sigma. I had, in my experience, a few papers where I submitted in some journals. They wrote back to me comments that, what is a theory which you have used to study Lean Six Sigma? We want to defend ourselves saying that Lean Six Sigma has a theoretical underpinning by itself. It is a strategic resource and an organizational capability. So, to study Lean Six Sigma, we did this explorative study in order to emerge some theoretical themes from our study. So, it's no theory which is established, used here, but the observations are revealing us some theoretical findings. For example, a company need to develop and sustain competitive advantage for quality is what drives banks to go for Lean Six Sigma. This is a theoretical observation because in the past, Lean Six Sigma was observed as an operational resource. But here our observation says it's a strategic resource because it talks about the competitive advantage. There's a whole lot of literature of dynamic capabilities by David Teese which talks about how can we generate competitive advantage in different parts of the organization, like competitive advantage for quality, competitive advantage in human resources, competitive advantage in business models, etc. And this clearly follows several characteristics which was prescribed by Professor Teese. For example, it talks about the path dependency. I'm jumping onto this point. It depends upon the path dependency and emergence phenomena. It exhibits organizational learning in the firms due to the ability of contributing towards the first order, which is explorative learning, the second order, which is explorative learning, and the meta-learning, that is learning about the learning. So all 3 were observed in the analysis. So this is definitely a strategic resource for managers in order to improve the organizational learning capability.
Talking on the point number 3, the organizational capability needs to be nourished for progress and it can be influenced. So, like any other capability like knowledge management or talent management, Lean Six Sigma needs to be nourished. It gets affected by the influencing factors both inside and outside the organizations. Yes, so Lean Six Sigma exhibits the technical and evolutionary fitness. So what does the technical fitness mean? The technical fitness of a capability is the intended purpose of that capability. So the Lean Six Sigma is to improve quality in my organization. Yes, of course, it means that. But that's not the end of its purpose, right? The evolutionary fitness is how can it actually trigger other capabilities in the organization. Lean Six Sigma triggers organizational learning capability. Lean Six Sigma triggers knowledge management capability, etc. Right? So that's the evolutionary fitness. That means over a period of time, a capability is able to trigger other capabilities in the organization. And in our findings, we found Lean Six Sigma is able to do that over a period of 3 years. The most importantly, it exhibits the brain characteristics, the value, rareness, inimitability, and non-substitutability at different degrees, of course, in varying degrees. Environmental dynamism, agility towards the changing environment. So when we're talking about the Lean or talking about Six Sigma independently, the agility towards environmental dynamism has been challenging. Because these approaches are very different from each other, because the starting point of Lean comes from the frontline staff and starting point of Six Sigma comes from the top management. So how they respond to the change in the market is so different in these two cases, and they have their own challenges. But Lean Six Sigma exhibited more agility towards environmental dynamism. So we confirm the Lean Six Sigma is a higher order capability that contributes to both operational and strategic outcomes in the firm, and it enables the creation and sustenance of competitive advantage for quality. So concluding, so we have a few limitations of this study. This study is done on a purposive sample of 3 banks, so we cannot make strong generalizations that Lean Six Sigma leads to competitive advantage in banks as a whole. But of course, this leaves us an opportunity to explore this more empirically across a larger sample of more players in the banking and financial services. The other aspect which is a limitation is that though the 3 banks which are selected are reputed banks having their presence across more than 22 countries in the world, the generalizability is still questioned in this, because the building blocks which you have selected here for the theory testing is still a gap in this particular piece of research. Right? Because this only presents the findings as a theoretical theoretical model probably, or a theoretical framework, but the empirical validation of this needs could lead to more generalization. The future research should bridge this gap, and the future research should try to empirically validate our prescriptions which we are trying to provide here for Lean Six Sigma and banking. Right. So that's all I have on the slides. Thank you very much.